Welcome back to the John Foucade Show, sponsored each week by Veterans Ford. One of our John Foucade specials this week, a 2014 Ford Focus sedan. Sale price $14,495. List for $19,000. You can get it right here at Veterans Ford for $14,495. Come see the dealer for details. No better place than right here, Veterans Ford on Veterans Boulevard. Welcome back to the John Foucade Show, sponsored each week by Veterans Ford. Mike Detillier along with John Foucade. John, basically season ended for the Saints. A lot of changes on so far. We've seen some assistant coaches that we know are on the way out. The big story, though, certainly middle of the week, Rob Ryan staying as the defensive coordinator. Bottom line, though, you got to get better players for Rob Ryan. And what I consider better players is what I put as fit players, guys that fit his scheme. You can talk about coaching, players, everything else, but you got to get the right fit players for what he's doing schematically with the Saints.
Well, Mike, there's no doubt about it. You can't just keep replacing, defensive coordinators every year, because a lot of them all have different schemes, 3-4, 4-3, whatever they want. But you are right about it. You got to get the players to fit what he's asking these guys to do. He's not more or less the guy that's going to sit back like Spagnuolo was and hope that they can make turnovers and get turnovers. That's what they need to have, though. If you're going to bring the heat, he wants to put pressure on quarterbacks, wants those quarterbacks to make the mistakes. But Mike, you know as well as I do, it's not like the 09 year when they were in the 30s getting turnovers. If you don't get turnovers, doesn't matter who you got coaching your defense. You got to have turnover to help your defense because of the scheme that he wants to use. So I think this offseason, they're going to be looking for players to come in here on the defensive side of football to contribute to what Rob Ryan wants.
I think one of the things you have to look at is the way the game's played today. It is all about one, pressure and coverage. And when I look at it, I think right off the bat, you got to bring in a veteran cornerback. You've tried all this other stuff. You got to bring in a veteran cornerback. Other than center, I think that's the 1A, 1B priorities for this football team. You also got to look at bringing heat. Pressure on the quarterback. Pressure breaks the pipe. I don't care who you're playing. That is a big issue. So to me, you got to put that as the highest priority defensively, is to find somebody that can match up opposite Keenan Lewis. If you believe Stanley Jean-Baptiste somewhere down the line can be a starter or play for your football team, that's fine. Man, I'm worried about winning today.
Right.
All this stuff about project players, leave that project player to somebody else to worry about. I'm worried about winning today. That means bringing in a veteran corner and also a heat pass rusher. A guy like a Vic Beasley from Clemson, Dante Fowler from University of Florida. Those guys come off the board quickly. So you're going to know one thing. If you want one of those guys, you may have to target them to move up to get them. Because if you're sitting where you're at, you're gonna. A lot of those guys are going to get picked clean by the time you pick, even in the teens.
Well, Mike, when you start looking at the players that they're out on the board, it's going to be a rookie that you're hoping to do it. If you're looking for a free agent type player to come in here who's got, I guess you could say, years under his belt that can rush the quarterback, is that what you're looking for? I think the best way they need to do is find him a younger guy to do that. Now, with that being said, you look at the defensive lineman they have now. They gave a lot of money away to a guy named Junior Galetta. I don't care if he had 10 sacks this year. If you look at where his sacks came from, when 5 of those sacks when the game was out of reach, in the fourth quarter didn't mean anything. Well, how about Cam Jordan, who was a Pro Bowler a couple of years ago? He fell off. Those guys are different. Those aren't the kind of guys you're looking for to bring the heat. You got to have a guy, like you said, Beasley from Clemson, Fowler, guys that are in that capability of being a pass rusher. These guys that they have now aren't really what I call classic pass rushers. They can get to the quarterback, but it's not like these guys, the 6'4", 6'3", 240, 250 range who are very mobile to get to. And also, Mike, can they drop back? Because sometimes these guys have to play to drop in the scheme of things that Rob wants you.
I think one of the things that has to be looked at and taken a real hard look at is the development of your defensive line. Now, that's where coaching may come into play here. What's happened? Why was all this expectation on Akeem Hicks and he dropped off in play? He didn't make that next step. Cam Jordan has a great season from a pass rush standpoint. We always knew he could play the run. What happened on that end? John Jenkins, and that's a mercurial deal with John. Almost goes back to his Georgia days where one week you saw him, he was a real good player, the next week off, and we saw that this year. Who's pushing the right buttons with those 3 key guys up front? Because I think you can't get rid of all of them. You're going to have to keep those guys on this football team who can develop them. And that made me a change on the coaching ranks along the defensive line.
Well, you know, they made some changes already in the coaching staff. You know, the secondary coach, I don't know what's going on with that. He was supposed to go to Vanderbilt, but the last I heard, Vandy's going to have the head coach, Mason, calling the defenses, but they said
that ain't good.
I
don't like the head coach calling.
But you're losing your secondary coach because they didn't have a really good secondary. Now, next position is the D-line. Who's coaching that D-line? Should they make a change? Sometimes guys have been around, they just can't get things going with these linemen, but there are some linemen that the Saints have here who are capable of playing, Mike. You know these guys are capable of doing their job. What is the issue with the defensive line? And it's soon to be seen what's going to happen. Are they done with their coaching changes? Or
no, I don't think it is.
There's some more moves to be made between now and the draft.
I have no doubt about that, and we've already started seeing that situation. And we look on the offensive side of the football. You know, Curtis Johnson was one heck of a receivers coach. They've really felt that. Henry Ellett, and a lot of times, John, you understand this, that when you're a great player, sometimes it's hard to translate that to coaching because it's natural to you. You know how to pick things up at a different level. Curtis, I thought, did a great job with the Saints receivers. Terry Malone had been a long-time coach on this team. He's a low-key guy. I think maybe Sean feels as though to get the best out of Jimmy Graham, he needs some guy that can push Jimmy and maybe a little bit more hard-edge coach, so to speak, at that tight end position. One of the things that has to be looked at, too, is to the development of the youth along the offensive line. They've only got one starter that's under 30 years old on this football team, only one. And he's a good player, Teron Armstead. But, again, you're going back to this. It's easier to change the coach than the players in today's week. It is a lot easier to change the coach than the player.
It is. When you talk about the O-line here in this scenario, you say one guy's under 30, and he only got nicked up at the end of this year. He started having neck or head problems, shoulder issues. But look at, you know, Zach Street. He's gone down with quite a few injuries over the last 4 or 5 weeks of the season. You know, Grubbs is not getting any younger. And, you know, Evans is not. And you know what happened with Goodwin? He got hurt every other series. I mean, you got to get younger on the offensive line, but you got to also, when you say get younger, make sure you get better. You can't just say we're going to go in age, but these guys have got to perform. And the only way they're going to happen, Mike, is get younger and play these kids.
Another thing, too, is one free agent to take a long look at would be Rodney Hudson, who was a former Florida State guy, a really good football player who has started with the Kansas City Chiefs as an unrestricted free agent. A lot of people say, what about Tim Lelito? My thing is, why didn't the Saints play Tim Lelito when Jonathan Goodwin was hurt basically for 3/4 of the season? You question Mark exactly, is he a center or a guard? I think he's best suited for the guard position.
He's a guard position.
I think he's much better suited for that guard
spot.
spot.
Need to find him a pure guy who played center, who, if you need him in a pinch, can play guard. Don't get a guard who you want to convert to a center. Some guys just don't do that. You got to get yourself a pure, I played center 4 years in college, that's my guy.
One of the guys, though, you played with did make that transition, Steve Court.
Yes.
He was a guard at Arkansas, became a really good center in the NFL. I think the big question mark is what will happen at running back. Are you going to make that offer to Ingram to stay, or do you think Kyrie Robinson can be your guy? He was nicked up. My thing is, I think the Saints make a money play to try to keep Mark Ingram. I think the big question mark is, does Mark agent push him to say, you know what, we may get more elsewhere if we go free agent route?
I agree with you. I think he needs to stay here. I think he had a productive season. Mickey Loomis made a comment in regard to him and Cooks were two of the better players that they had all year long that produced for them. You know, does he want to test the money? How much money more will somebody give him? You know, his agent's going to say test. And I have no problem with him testing the market.
Exactly.
I mean, he should be. He deserves to do that. But if it's a situation where the Saints are close to the same ballpark, he'd be smart enough to stay here because he knows he's going to be the lead back. I don't care what you say. You can still make money, go somewhere else. And sometimes it just don't work for you. Ben Tate.
Ben Tate's a great example of that. He's bounced around since he signed that big contract with the Cleveland Browns. We'll have a lot more here on the John Foucade Show, sponsored each week by Veterans Ford. We'll be right back.